Hey, welcome everybody to the Zoom Test Kitchen. It's Friday afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern, and this is when we meet every week. My name's Jeff Widgren, and I super glad to be here. It's a special day when we have some visitors and guests from Zoom and help us dig into how they're kind of leading the way out there in the event space and hybrid space and added tools inside of Zoom and outside of Zoom and how they're all tying together. So like to send a special welcome to, I think we've got a lot of Zoomies in here today. Some I haven't met, but I see your shirts. We got Andy Carluccio, welcome. We have Sam Kukaiko as well. I'm going to look at the screen now. Olivia Powers, welcome. Colin Mulcahy, did I get that right? And Kevin Babcock. And I think that covers the Zoomies that
I think you just recruited Colin to Zoom. He's got a nice shirt, but
yeah, there you go. So we've got that. Got Tamara in the house. Jonathan, hello. Trevor, hello. Mike, David, got a few. David, if you wouldn't mind, as a matter of fact, I'm going to give you host and let you switch the show.
Can I turn off recording real quick so I can jump in ISO?
Yeah. Yeah, we're streaming live on our YouTube channel, Zoom Test Kitchen. The @ Zoom Test Kitchen now, right? They finally got us our handle there. So easy to get to, easy to advertise. Like the day I got it was the day I ended up on the top of the Google search. If you just search that handle, it's kind of cool. So anyways, it's, we've got, what are we, just over a week from the conclusion of Zoomtopia. And that's what today, and I know you guys have been busy with Sam. You've got 3 webinars, right, that are following up Zoomtopia, that are just digging in to behind the scenes and the Zoom events platform and so forth. So, and Andy, I don't know how tight you are to that schedule as well. I know you guys are always running. So yeah, why don't you guys give us a heads up of that schedule so that if people come up with questions even after today, if they attended office hours, I think it was the day after Zoomtopia ended, you guys did a review there as well. But where will you be and when will you be there?
Yeah, so the upcoming events that you just mentioned, we've got the 3 behind the scenes webinars. I had a session giving a very, very high level overview at Zoomtopia. And then basically what I said there is that I was kind of taking about 6 minutes of content in the middle there, and we're turning that into 3 hours of content for this webinar series. Those 3 webinars, I did just drop them in the chat within this meeting. Awesome. We'll need to figure out how we get those sent out to those who may be watching on the streams later or the recordings after the fact. They are available on our, at this point, they've started coming up on our website. If you go to zoom.us/events, that has our upcoming webinars, and you can definitely start to find some of these there. But it's going to be November 29th is the first one. That one's going to touch on the sort of behind the scenes of the native product features. There's more of the Zoom events side specifically. That one's going to be led by Robin Bunovich, our PMM for Zoom events, and then Megan Buffington, who's actually on the event services team and was the one who the host for Zoomtopia on Zoom events, the one who built all the actual sessions and handled all the speakers and the management of that piece. She's going to be digging in a lot on some of the specific tips and tricks, some more actionable, interesting use cases behind specifically how we handled ticketing and access control, our video on demand post-event experience, some of those things within Zoom events, and the latest and greatest there. Second is going to be the following week on December 6th. And that one's going to be the one that I lead myself. That one's going to be focused on producing hybrid events with Zoom. So that's really going to very much we're going to actually have a tech table that we'll bring the camera down onto that shows you got a ZoomISO machine into a ADEM into Zoom desktop client to get it out, and going through screen by screen of exactly what settings are you doing, exactly how are you doing this. Very, very in the weeds technical.
Yeah.
The third one is going to be led primarily by Jonathan and then myself. And that one's going to be more of the engagement tools. So that's going to be December 13th. You'll notice this is 3 weeks in a row on Tuesdays.
Yep.
But that one is going to be kind of the how-to behind how we did some of the things like the chat overlays and chat bots that you saw, bridging the companion webinar together, emoticons and reactions up on the main screen, the gallery views and the way we do those sorts of things, and showing kind of all the recipe behind what we came up with.
Very, very cool. Yeah, I've walked away and found myself telling people about Zoomtopia, and I just said, it was just a perfect footprint, example, demo, show and tell, of you could walk around and chat and ask questions. You could see a lot of the gear and then experience being in the audience, and then attend your breakout session there at the end, which was still the media session of all the sessions because just your whole approach and the way you grab onto Q&A and invite it, that's where you're comfortable, and you just don't hold any bones on just laying it out there, which is super attractive in our space anyways, right? And so it was really a great model of very best efforts and beyond of a hybrid event. And, so I think that that was a great walk away for me. I'll say I walked away going, damn, that show had to have been expensive. I mean, without a doubt, I don't think anybody's running around the world saying hybrid events are cheap, but there's a big investment, I think, of funds for hardware, skills in people, right? And which equates to payroll and so forth as well. But then, a ton of planning as well. Can it be done? You guys showed that it can definitely be done. Will it be a forever thing? We are where we are. And so you have to embrace it and support it. You don't necessarily have to say that, hey, this is the way it's going to be forever. I think definitions of in-person, definitions of virtual only will refine themselves over time. And so those big investments of kind of big hybrids are out there. So glad to have you guys here. I put in the email invitation, this isn't necessarily a presentation. I don't know if anybody has a deck. I don't think so. But you're here to, just explain things. Really, we're going to kick it off with, open Q&A. I'll let you guys lead the way on just inviting those questions and attending to them and so forth. But I think there's just tons to be learned, and this can be the mechanics, the hardware, the software, and so forth. But I know last week we spent 2 hours just talking about hybrids and kind of the mental piece, the human piece, the invitations and so forth. I even shared. Now, this is just from an outsider looking in. It was a bit assumptive, but it was from what I was seeing. I felt like there might be some truth that says it was hard to get people in person to that event. Maybe a little harder than anticipated. I don't know. That's not coming from any facts or inside information that I know, just my witness. Because I saw ticket prices, go from here to here to here to here, and then the blasts and the invites became heavier and heavier, which is somewhat common marketing. But needless to say, it wasn't the largest IT in-person event that I've been to in my life either, but it was well attended. I don't know what the numbers were. I heard 70,000 remote. Do you guys have kind of a general supporting number of how many virtual attendees there were?
I don't have a number to share on that. The number I do have is over 1,200 in-person attendees, which is actually past what our reg goals were. So that is the event size they intended to build, knowing that while the in-person event is a big part of Zoomtopia, and we were glad to get back to it this year, we always knew going into it that was not where the majority of our numbers were going to come from. That the hybrid, the Zoom experience of it is very much top of mind, center of focus, where the majority of our users are going to end up.
Yeah, absolutely. yeah, I've trained them to use a tool that doesn't require flying and hoteling and all that, right? I mean, it's great that way. So it, I think there's a business aspect, right? Kind of where are we? And I don't expect you guys to have that answer, but you guys went for it, and it was just so impressive, and the the art of it going into the expo, going into the big keynote room, the art of it as far as colors and matching. I mean, it was perfection. I pointed out I was on the champions monthly call yesterday and just did a little slide deck of photographs that I had taken, and things that I caught were even the not the big screen on stage, but the ones that were coming, hanging out in the crowd, the side decorative frames that were illuminated, and they were perfectly color matched. I mean, when the end of the show came and it had the Zoom logo up there with the blue background, those side pieces matched identically to the blue background of the closing slide too. I was just super impressed, all the detail of the artistic side, creative side of the whole event as well, let alone what you guys will share as well. So everybody can chat inside the Zoom meeting today. So if you have questions, I am, in fact, I don't commonly pay a lot of attention to the chat on YouTube, but I am today. And so if you have questions on the YouTube channel, certainly feel free to submit them there, and we'll do our best to make sure they get spoken here in the meeting live. And outside of that, who wants to kind of kick things off? Andy, Sam, anybody else?
Sure. So I'll start with just kind of, I don't know if I'm even going to pull around the room or just kind of talk about the experience in general. So I did drop a link also in here for a BizBash article that actually dropped today. Oh, and I'm just going to go ahead and take the moment to say, Olivia, yeah, no, totally, we need to go work on that title. Separate thing that we just caught. But yeah, that BizBash article dropped today. And it was just from a little short interview they did with me where we talked about some of that experience and some of the mindset behind it. And I gotta say, the writer of the article did a really, really great job of parsing those thoughts into what I thought was an incredibly accurate narrative of what we were trying to do. And how it portrayed. So I would definitely encourage everyone to check that out. But yeah, so from the start, we knew that we were focusing on it as a kind of digital first hybrid show. That was our thought from day one. And the big things that played into was how we were going to navigate all the different theaters and stages and what capabilities they would have. And so the rules that we made for ourselves very much at the forefront was that every single theater was going to be Zoom enabled for remote speakers as well as for remote audiences, regardless of what the plans were. There were definitely plenty of sessions that were not planned to have a remote audience. There were plenty of sessions that were not planned to have a remote speaker. But I've been in a position over the past couple of years here to watch, particularly over the last year, as everyone started to return to in-person events, and then pivoted back consistently. I watch people time and again think that they're going to go full on back to on-site and then find out that no matter what you do, you're going to be calling me a week in to the event saying, well, I have some audience members who need to see it remotely. I need to start up a stream. I need to bring in the speaker because their significant other got sick, whatever it may be. And so from the start, we knew that we didn't want to end up in that position. So we built everything to be capable of it. And I'm not going to lie, there was definitely times that I felt wasteful with it as we were buying the equipment, as we were producing all the computers that were going to run all the Zoom connections in and out of these rooms. There were definitely times that I felt, this is silly. Why do I have primaries and backup systems for all these different rooms with nothing on the books? And then a couple of days later, I would get a ping. Oh, hey, we need to change this. Or we need to change that. Or, can we do this? And the answer always was yes. It really doesn't even affect my team. We're already planning for it. As a matter of fact, even the sessions that weren't going to the virtual attendees were still streamed to Zoom events every single time, whether or not we had even opened it up for any attendees to be able to see that. And that's what you'll see in that session with Megan, where she talks about the ticketing, the access control, the way we did that, so that there were sessions that audience members did not have inside of their tickets, but I could still have chat moderators, Q&A moderators, panelists, remote support assigned to the session that could operate from there. And then what you'll see in Jonathan's session is that why we needed them, and where they could be either in that room or they could be remote, and they could still be moderating the chat and the Q&A through the tools that we built that were actually spanning across both that webinar and the companion webinar, which was the only one that actually had attendees. So I can have people on this companion webinar in the room asking questions, and I can have somebody else anywhere in the world moderating those questions for the speaker on the stage there.
I think there were these like quiet whispers going, how in the world did they know that that's an in-person question versus an external question? And, then the theories of, oh, those were setups or this is like, no. And you explained it in your breakout, which really helped clarify. And if I go really simple as, hey, camera to your equipment to an outbound, 2 outbounds, right? The public webinar, if you will, and an internal webinar, but 2 separate webinars, one that had audio and video you described, one that did not have audio and video, but that's what we connected to in the room. And so in the room, we could scan a QR code or type in the meeting ID, join the webinar, really for the sole purpose of being able to see the chat, contribute to the chat, but then you guys color coded it, right? And so you could distinguish between whether that came from somebody in front of you in a chair or somebody out there remote as well. And then hats off to you guys for going the extra mile and taking a Tony and sending them up to a studio that none of us saw, but to emulate or simulate a remote contributor as well. I mean, you didn't really have to do that, but that's where I really just go, wow, you guys went the extra mile to simulate what it would be like and what it could feel like. And it was a high-end example with the portrait, positioned large screens, versus the 16:9s and so forth. I mean, it was just really well done. And so it was great. I mean, it wasn't just a deliverable, but it was an example as well, which I thought was a real plus.
And that was something I had to fight for pretty hard. But I did win that fight, and we did get to do it. And I think we got to use it in some cool places. Andy actually got to present from his session from that studio. And it was that idea of kind of showing the world firsthand. I keep seeing ads on one of my social medias from a competitor talking all about hybrid events, and it's always these webinars with their little ads, and it's always a webinar with 2 people talking with a blurred background on a built-in webcam, talking about the future of hybrid events. And it really drives me crazy because it's not like, show me what you can do. And that's
And one thing I'd add as well, Jeff, to consider, and this is not to say that, Zoomtopia was a perfect, flawless event and everything, you go do exactly everything that we did. But one thing I thought was particularly effective at leveling the playing field for both remote and in-person attendees was the chat and Q&A experience, because it truly was the same for whether or not you were in person or remote. You had the same experience. You had the same chance of having your interaction appear on screen. You had the same chance of engaging with audiences remotely through the same type of interface that everybody was used to. And of course, we played with that a bit to create some different graphics. And we can, certainly talk about areas where the in-person and virtual audiences were different. But again, I think about Zoomtopia as looking for little key nuggets or takeaways that might help you with your next event. And I felt that this was probably one of the strongest pieces of all of Zoomtopia, was the fact that interaction was handled on a completely level playing field, regardless of whether you came to Zoomtopia or whether you participated through Zoom remotely.
Agreed. Absolutely. I mean, it was flawless. It was colorful. It was easy to read. I mean, I just say it was scaled well for the room to where we could read it. I mean, the keynote area, poor Eric, he was tiny compared to that massive screen. But outside of that, the chat was easy to read. The reactions were really easy to see. It was the first time as an in-person audience member that I ever felt the roar of remote attendees. I did. It's just like, that's amazing. I mean, I think Jonathan was even cranking them down a little bit, right? Just to manage the density he was describing on the screen, but still you could really feel the excitement from folks that you weren't necessarily able to see, but it was really impressive. And I mean, there's always opposers. There are folks that were talking about the reactions were a distraction or whatnot, and those are just subjective chunks of feedback. I mean, I think most people that I've talked to had some really positive feedback on that, the excitement, the energy of the crowd, and along with the ease of following. I mean, the active question was always at the bottom, was always white on green. It was just really easy to follow, no training necessary, and it was really well presented.
Yeah, I think as we were looking through the design of those keynotes, especially on the main stage, working with the designers and stuff, I kept getting pushback on exactly where we were going to use the reactions and the chat and the scroll and the galleries into, like, no, it'll just be for like these key moments. It'll just be for like just these wow factor moments. We don't want it to detract from the content. And then we found, like, throughout the 2 days that me and Lindsay, the main kind of executive producer for that space, just kind of kept going back to, like, they're just our background. It is the back layer of our show. It is kind of this, it almost feels like this omnipresent thing that is always there. The person next to me is always there. You don't hide them from me. You don't hide the rest of the audience when I turn my head.
That's exactly what just went through my head. It's like, you don't tell them to come and go.
You're not putting blinders on me in the room. And so that ended up taking a very similar role, and we found ourselves using it a lot more than we had intended to, and leaving it up more often than we had intended to. I think especially with the reactions, one of the things that's really, really great about reactions, you will notice that there's not really negative reactions. So from a security and a moderation standpoint, as an event producer, they are really an amazing way to get active participation and feedback and lead your audience to give that to you, and give kind of this feedback circle with them where it's building and you're getting that feel from them without a lot of risk, because there's not angry faces in there. They aren't thumbs down. So
did you
not even like the chat.
Did you filter? Because you can configure in the portal, if you desired, to allow these reactions, right? You kind of build your own library. Did you have your own library, or was it the default Zoom library?
It's the default Zoom library, but I think that also is different between meeting and webinar, if I remember right.
Yeah,
in webinar, it's just the base pack, versus in meeting, you can choose if you just allow all emojis, especially in the chat is where it's at.
Yeah.
And those render differently. So this was the whole slew of the base library, but
Cool.
Definitely in chat, you have to be careful. You have to moderate, and putting chat scrolls up there is definitely scary, especially in a large scale event like this. We had moderators working on that, but we were taking a risk every time we put that up there, versus the reactions I think you can do even when you have scarier audiences. That, I definitely work with different event hosts working on events that may be in more targeted industries, especially things around politics or religion. If you're an organization and they're an organization where bad actors may not like you as much, versus in the grand scheme of things, we don't have near as much to target on our back as lots of organizations do when they're trying to host events. And so you definitely have to be aware of what options. But, in that article, I kind of told a story about sitting with Jonathan backstage and watching, and I saw somebody drop in the chat, like, hey, everybody do surprise faces. And then just this wave of surprise faces crawl up the screen. And it was really awesome getting to watch.
It's like being in a stadium, and everybody gets the wave going.
The wave, right?
Yeah.
And it really was, this is people actually being here together with each other in real time. This is why this event is live instead of something you watch on TV. This is why you go to the bar to watch the football game, is to have this interaction. And I really think as event producers, that should be everyone's top focus. As content producers, make content. as event producers, if you're making synchronous events, give them a reason to come synchronously. Otherwise, make async content.
Yeah. Yeah. I know we talked last week about, and even, I don't remember, I've had this conversation a few times since Zoomtopia and some before as well. And it is, if you're asking audience members, attendees to attend your live event, even if it's remote, remote live, you've got to give them a reason to be there live that isn't there and available for them on playback. And then the same thing with in person. What is it that you're going to be able to experience only in person, if that's your drive, right? Yeah, I mean, but to know it and understand it is to enable an organization to direct and plan their marketing accordingly. We want a larger remote audience. We want a larger in-person audience. And it's based on those unique events that only exist in person or only exist live. Otherwise, just pre-record, get a better result and let them all play it back, because there was really nothing special about live. You just happened to be there when they were recording it, but it really, I think those little pieces of definition are what's being developed. And that's why I appreciate so much that you guys just went for it. And, I know you guys have tough skin, just because of what you do and so forth. But, I think open dialogue, even some of the tough stuff, because you put yourself out there, I think it's it should be very healthy dialogue to learn from and run with and adapt and so forth. So I really look forward to how this continues to mature itself.
Yeah. So I did see, John, you're kind of asking about the methodology behind how this worked. And so at a base level, like when we talk about that main stage, at a base level, ignoring the companion webinar for a second, and we'll just go simple. Say I have my one webinar. We can connect up a ZoomOSC instance, and then every time a message is sent inside that webinar chat, it can see it, it can pull it out and treat it as data. And so that can either be handled inside of Isadora or whatever platform of choice you want to use. For us, Andy's team actually built us a really great node server that handles that chat and then turns it into HTML and CSS, which makes styling it really, really great, makes the animations and the smoothness. So like what you saw on that main stage with that chat scroll, we actually built all of that, rendered all of that, and then handed a straight NDI feed with transparency over to Canvas. Whereas the bubbles and stuff, we were handing them the individual NDI feeds, but we worked with Immersive Design Studios with the Canvas platform to take those videos, mask them into that circle, add the border, and then choose kind of that animation style as they're popping on and off. Whereas like the gallery that I showed in my session was something that Jonathan built inside Isadora ourselves. But the chat scrolls, everywhere you saw them in all the theaters, in the virtual, wherever it was all actually being rendered by us. That again, that was a tool that events engineering built for us. Kind of the base way it then goes when we're dealing with the companion webinar is that there are bots in both of them, in the main webinar and the companion webinar, listening to those messages and then repeating them back into the other. So they actually rename themselves. So if I'm in one, Jeff's in the other, I drop a chat, a bot in mine renames itself to Sam, sends that chat inside the other webinar. And then there's a complicated series of filters and whatnot. It's a lot of work to build. And that's kind of where we've gotten at this point. Is what you'll see a lot from us on the services side is us being very open and transparent about how we did these things, because the use cases, like one of our main purposes is just kind of getting your brain spinning on what could I do with ZoomOSC? What could I do with these tools, these awesome tools to get this data in and out? But then when it comes down to ultimately, there's a lot of legwork and a lot of thought that needs to go into how am I going to process it? How am I going to moderate it? What do I want the behavior to be? How does it scale? How fast can I do it? Those sorts of things that we've done a lot of the legwork. And so that's where services still has a lot of value for either customers or in between contracting firms, like production companies that want to bring this to their customer events, that want to subcontract us to do this one part. One of the really cool things about the tool that Andy built us is all those overlays that you saw they're HTML and they're remotely available. So we can do stuff where the services team, you just give us the meeting IDs. We join, we run the bots in the server system, and then we just give you a URL back and say, hey, pop this into vMix, pop this into OBS, and there's your chat scroll.
One of the things I want to drive home is that, while there certainly is a lot of innovation and work that went into producing Zoomtopia, the core ingredients and the methodologies and workflows are the very same workflows we've come to the test kitchen and spoken about for the past year and a half. Using ZoomOSC to get the data, using ZoomISO to get the audio and video, Isadora to do processing, or media servers to do, interactivity, right? It's all the same steps that we've been encouraging you guys to look at. And again, in the spirit of showing, I just wanted to say that, it's definitely not a secret by any means. And if it is, it's the worst kept secret ever, because, we've been coming here so often and talking about it.
That's right.
But it's just an opportunity for you guys to see that when you follow those steps or deploy those technologies or use them in this way, you can scale up to these type of end results. So I hope that that's, inspiration. But the core workflows are the same workflows that we've been talking about consistently.
So help me understand. I can easily understand a remote attendee posting a chat comment, you capturing it, deciding whether it's going to continue to flow or kill it, depending on the content, and it ending up on the stage. That's a gimme because that's a pre-capture. But what about those folks in the webinar? I mean, you and I have had discussions in the past that says, once it's in the chat, it's in the chat. I mean, I can't stop it from going public in the chat window of the Zoom client, but if there's another destination such as being produced, but how did you handle? I mean, I'm going to assume until you answer me and correct me, I guess. And I'm assuming the remote audience saw everything. And the in-person got the filtered, prettied up version. Is that a fair assumption?
Two things I can tell you about how to moderate chat and what the requirements are to do it. One, you can actually set prohibited words for webinar chat back end, and so that'll actually prevent it from ever getting in. The second thing you can do is delete chat, and you delete chat by requesting this delete chat enablement. We talked about this on the test kitchen a couple of weeks ago. It's a flag that can be set. You send in a support ticket and you request it. And if you're on any paid Zoom account, my understanding is that you have the ability to delete the chat messages. That could be enabled for you. You go into the back end, you turn that on. So moderation can actually happen and reach back into the Zoom client. Now, this does enforce a minimum version requirement, but as you saw with Zoom's quarterly lifecycle policy, we hope that that's becoming less of an issue because there's a mandatory upgrade cycle. Now, we do that because it's good for security, right? And privacy of your data and all of that stuff for sure. But for event producers, this is very helpful because the trailing number of client versions that you have to worry about, what their experiences are going to be, are reduced. We're not talking about a 2-year-old client. And the minimum version for this has got to be a year or more at this point.
It is, because we used it at Zoomtopia last year. So it's I think a year and a half old or so.
So it should be updated. I think 5.8.6 is the Zoom client version that is minimum enforced at this point as of November 5th. So it's certainly before that.
So if I heard that right, will a bad comment can get filtered out? Let's say it hits a defined profane word, and it gets kicked before anybody sees it. What if was there a human filter in your process during the keynote, for instance, where a human is making the decision, and would that be more of a flash and remove element in the webinar for the remote? I know it would never hit the stage because that decision is made before it ever gets out. But what about in the webinar? Because you can, like you said, you can delete the post, and it didn't hit the automated delete. But then if there's a human filter there, it was there momentarily and then kicked fairly quickly. Or
so stepping back to the actual Zoom feature, the Zoom feature with the minimum version and with the setting does allow the host and co-hosts to delete messages from chat.
Sure. No, I get that.
That is possible. So that Didn't hit a
but
filter or
not
anything.
but not before it's seen.
Not before it's seen. Yeah, there's not a preview function, but you can, once it pops up, react to it, remove it before it does too much damage.
Yeah.
There's not a way to like pre-filter all of with a human guiding all of that for in Zoom. Now, once you're pulling the data out by ZoomOSC and using it in a chat overlay or something like that, what behavior do you want? So you can definitely, there's 3 core ways you could use it. I guess, yeah, three core ways you could use it. One is actually what we did on the scrolls. They go on the scroll. From there, if a human needs to come in and say, this needs to go away, we can do that. We can remove one. But it does go to screens, and that's where they see it and see that, hey, I didn't want this there. That's what we actually did. The scariest of the options, but the fastest of the options, especially because we knew that we were going to have thousands of people on here chatting. We wanted to make sure that the chat was, relevant. So we wanted to make sure it was fast, and we were willing to take the risk. The other way would be using a broadcast delay style, where it comes in, it shows to your operator for 10, 20, 30 seconds before it goes to screens. And in that time, the operator has the ability to remove things before it goes out. The third way would be like what you saw with the highlighted chats, specifically in day 2's morning session, where at the end, we kind of brought up individual messages instead of just the chat scroll. We had gathered them into a bucket throughout the session, said, hey, I really like this one, I really like that one, made a bucket of them, and then dropped them all on the screen as kind of a highlighted message. And that would just be the idea of nothing goes to screen no matter how long, unless I specifically put it there. So everything goes to screen immediately and I can remove it. Everything goes to me and then goes to screen unless I stop it, or nothing goes to screen unless I put it there. And that's all in what tool are you building yourself, or how do you want the behavior after you've pulled the data out, you're processing it, and then you're building these views.
Thank you. Anybody else have questions? And feel free, chime in.
Another area, if you're curious, that I'm happy to answer on for the next little bit is if you have questions about any of the announcements, particularly the production related features and tools that we announced at Zoomtopia. I can be here for probably another 10, 15 minutes, and I can try to answer some of those as well.
Well, then I'll respond to that, especially with the limited time, and say, hey, talk to us as much as you're allowed to on Production Studio. That ability, because that's under your leadership, right? That development team there, and the ability to customize, develop and customize predefined layouts of different sized videos, bigger moderators, smaller panel videos, things like that, right? Tying people to those boxes, if you will, but give us an idea of what you guys are foreseeing. And I know we talked while we were out there of kind of, how much encroachment, right, does that have on us, producers, versus enablement for the users, and what's the benefit of it as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So we announced something called Production Studio, and Production Studio is a system that allows you to create scenes where you can customize border colors, aspect ratios, layouts, and backsplashes. And so this system is designed to bring branding and personalization and really production into webinars. And so the intention of it is that you are able to create a series of scenes that you can then switch between in a webinar, and the attendees will then see that scene, right? And that's at the very base level, that's what we're looking at here, and it's part of the Zoom Events platform. So what we're looking at in terms of actual impact to the market, I think there's a couple of things. First, it's making the ability for webinars hosted on our platform. And you've seen this in many different features that we've released over the past year, and this is one of them. We're increasing production value for everybody. We're giving you more features that allow you to control the look and feel of your experiences, both in webinar and in Zoom Events platform as well. And adding that without any external tools required. That's going to simplify for like the marketing agent at some business that needs to make their team look good or show up with brand colors. And I think you can see again where backsplash and all that starts to come in. That helps the non-technical user produce something a little better, a little more engaging that helps. For serious production, there's a couple of things that's unique about Production Studio that you might want to consider in terms of adding it to your tool belt. Production Studio is the only tool on our platform to date that allows the attendees and the panelists to be co-located in a single session with production elements added to it. Every other system you use, even if you go to the high end and you use Rooms or you use ZoomISO and vMix to produce it, because the video feed has to come to you and be mixed, if you return that back into the webinar as a virtual camera, the audio is going to go directly from the panelists to the attendees, but the video is going to go from the panelists to you to the attendees, and that will cause your show to be out of sync. So it's something that is really unique to Production Studio. And if you have those types of customer requirements, we've advised people about how to use ZoomOSC to transport chat and Q&A from one place and dump it in the chat in another place. But it's a fairly complex system, I'll be honest. There's a lot of learning that goes into deploying those types of tools. But now we can give somebody that look and feel without having to deploy all that additional architecture. And one other thing I'll mention about why I think it's good for even professional producers who are using external tools to become familiar with Production Studio. Not everybody's customer requirement involves a lot of complex graphics and overlays and animations and all of those things, right? Some people just need it to look a little better, and it gets them hungry for those things in the future, right? So if you as an event producer can use native Zoom tools to deliver a better experience, they'll start to think that anything is possible. And eventually you'll run into the limits of our platform and boom, you pull out the production. But in that early stage, we've reduced your cost and complexity because you're using Zoom native tools. And by learning how to kind of master these tools in places like the test kitchen, you'll be able to deliver value to your client where they don't even have to learn the events platform, right? You just know that and you can offer that as a service. Making good scenes, understanding basic rules of composition and art styles and color codes and how all that comes together to make a good looking image. Those skills still apply to Production Studio. So again, I would look at it as it's an opportunity for everybody. And it's not designed to compete with professional production workflows. Production Studio, just to set the expectation for everybody, is not going to be doing everything that you can do with vMix and professional hardware or software systems, right? But it's going to get you maybe 60, 70% of the way there. And for some jobs, that's all you need. And that system could be overkill, right, for that type of deployment. So there's a whole lot there that we can use to reduce your cost, reduce complexity, increase the number of events taking place on the Zoom platform that look and feel engaging with at least these basic elements, and then get people excited about doing more. And when they want to do more, they come to you and you show them everything that's possible on our platform.
Yeah. Well, I think about over the last couple of years, there were just so many conversations with, potential clients that, they have the expectations of the fully produced result, but the budget or financial mindset to be a Zoom only deliverable. And there really was very little in between. I mean, the moment we have to bust out, switching hardware or or vMix or OBS or something like that, we're saying no to the job because of the budget versus the complexity, right? Now I look at this, I'm going, this is something in between that will allow us to keep our tool set minimized, but in fact kind of beef up the deliverable a bit, all built into the tool. So it's really just knowledge, not capital investment of, loading up the truck and rolling in the gear as well. So yeah, I've thought about it a lot since, we were out there, and I think it has a really good, strong play for sure. And I just think as the Zoom tools continue to grow internally as a Zoom tool, it gets out of the reach of a lot of kind of individuals, if you will. They may be aware of its capabilities, but they'll continue to call the professionals just because it's a bigger package with more capability and so forth. I mean, we haven't even talked about the new inbox and the calendaring and, kind of the whole desktop console, but I think it's really exciting. Two more, I've got a few things.
Jeff, before you go, Colin Mulcahy just has a question.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Well, it's more just to relate to what you're just speaking about and the fact that Zoom has all these added tools. I don't think it really matters to us as providing high-end professional services because, as we were talking about earlier today on another channel, it's like the fact that you could pop into a meeting and do quality bombing on an event to upscale your services between camera equipment and then mixing it with production studio. The fact that you could take over that as for the client. Like I do AGMs and business meetings and all that kind of stuff. They still, no matter how beautiful, no matter how many features you can throw at them, they want somebody else to take care of it. And we're going, we can do A, B, C, and D. How would you like to mix it up? So
That's
I think
right.
I don't really have a fear about the fact that somebody has access to other tools and controls because they'll still hand it over to me. And it's my job to make life as easily and effortless for them in providing that experience that they turn around and just keep coming back to me for more. And so I think it's a great opportunity for all of us just to embrace whatever Zoom is throwing at us.
Yeah. And one more thing I'd say to that, Colin, is that, Production Studio isn't the only new thing that we've released this year, right? In the production space, we've actually, up until Zoomtopia, most of our talking points are about pro production, new features for Zoom Rooms, a brand new ZoomISO, new OSC commands. So if you are offering these broadcast level services, we've also given you guys more to continue to move forward, right? So and in fact, we started there. And I think that's very important that we started there. We gave you guys the opportunity to make your experiences even more complex, even more visually nuanced, even more powerful and efficient and scalable. And then we came and gave everybody else another tool to help them too. So we look at the kind of the multi-vectored market of different customer personas and how to serve each of them and make sure that the strategy around how we serve them is consistent across our platform.
Yeah, this when this question came up on the office hours last week when we were all there, Alex kind of ended the conversation with a great quote that stuck with me very, very much, and that was, "Pencils are cheap, but everybody still hires writers."
Yeah, no, it's great. It really is super meaningful. Whether Andy, if you've got to go, you can go. But I know there's two other in the production space projects under your development team, which is the double end recording, I believe, and the Zoom streaming app as well.
Yeah, let me do a flyby on those, and then I'll have to step out. But so double end recording is really exciting. Double end recording means that every participant in the recording is doing a local record of themselves while also being in the meeting. And then at the end, or asynchronously, let's say, their recording of themselves is uploaded to the Zoom cloud. So that means that in the Zoom cloud, you have not only isolated audio and video of everybody, but you actually have high quality, regardless of the bandwidth situation in play, right? Like even today with ZoomISO and an ATEM Extreme, right? That's a pretty good way of recording 8 people. But if their internet isn't there, it's still being compressed through our protocol. It might be stepping down to 360p. It might have momentary outages or shutouts, and you really don't have much control of that unless you can control their internet situation as well, which, the super high end, maybe that's possible. For most of us, that's probably not the case. So the beauty of double end recording is that you have the low latency synchronous experience, but everybody's doing a local capture, and that's asynchronously uploaded that you can then download and bring it into Final Cut or Premiere and actually throw an event together. One other thing that I'm excited about with it is, depending on how you do the details of the workflow and whether you need to clean up the edges or things like that, you could do a rough cut with the ZoomISO system on an ATEM Extreme, get the cuts, and then do a footage replacement with the download that you have from the Zoom cloud. And you might have to adjust the syncing a little bit because it could be different, depending on how the time codes all work out. But that's a really fast way to get a really high quality end product with the double end recording feature. So that's something really excited, and we will be sharing more about that next year. And then the streaming app, what's cool about it, you can live stream in Zoom today. As a matter of fact, we're doing it right now, but you can only stream to one place at a time. And the thing that's cool about the streaming app is let's say you wanted to go to Facebook and you wanted to go to Twitch and you want to go to YouTube at the same time. You just log in through the streaming app to those platforms, and you can see this in the designs that we showed on stage, but you log into the different platforms and then you just enable, and boom, our cloud pushes that out to all of the different destination platforms. So you don't need to use an intermediary service. You don't have to have multiple, If I was going to do this with a vMix rig, I would either do multiple RTMP encodes, or more frankly, what I would do is I'd get Caster or Restream. I would send one up there, and then I would split that out in Restream to the different CDNs, right? So that collapses all that complexity again back down into just the native client experience with the Zoom app. So I think that, again, you're going to be streaming the Zoom experience. You don't necessarily have more control than what we were showing, already with the feature that we have, but it's a better path to the feature, and it allows it to be reinitiated multiple times to go to different platforms. So that's why I'm excited about that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other quick hit questions before Andy's got to drop? But
Robert has his hand up, and I wanted to ask something also. I'll let Robert go first.
Go ahead,
Andy,
Robert.
great to see you, Sam, and all of you guys. Well done. Great job. We thoroughly enjoyed just watching what you did. Quick question: with all of this streaming to multiple platforms, I know you're going to hit me over the head with this one, but are we going to be able to choose which audio channel we stream out? And of course, I'm thinking of interpretation as usual.
No, it's definitely, I tell you that it's definitely something I've heard, not something that we've discussed about whether we will or won't and how we affect the stream. The way I think about the streaming app for now is it's the same stream that we normally do and the same rules apply, but it's just the ability to do it to multiple places and to have a claw back a little bit more control of how that's configured. And there's a couple of things that we didn't announce about the streaming app that I think you'll be excited about, but I'm going to hold that card until we launch it, and then I'll come back and we can share some more.
Can I quickly ask, what about streaming to scheduled events? Right now, it's a major pain to have to set up the event on YouTube, grab the stream key and all that stuff, come back into Zoom, put it all in, and then you have to go back to YouTube and press go live. Will that be supported?
Yeah, so it's not a detail that I can get into just yet. However, it's a use case that we've definitely thought about. Each platform in its own way has a couple of different versions of this. So I don't want to get too into the weeds and say something that might apply just to Facebook or YouTube. I forget exactly how they all interact, but there's this idea, right, that you can pre-create the stream and then you just want to put the Zoom into it. Or there's the idea that you haven't done any pre-scheduling, you just want to spin up and go. And that both use cases are interesting to us. I think that you should think about the streaming app as well as sort of a phased project. And you also have to understand that one of the things that's complex about building a streaming app like this is that we're also beholden to what the third-party platforms allow from APIs. And after events in 2015, 2016 on these platforms, they really did start to clamp down on, because of concerns about bots, what they do and don't allow to happen, and probably for good reason. So there's a little bit of that we have to play with as well. So I don't want to say that yes, that works, or no, that doesn't work, because it's platform specific and we haven't announced the details yet. But when the streaming app comes out, let's go back and look at it together and figure out how we can do or not do, or feature request or whatever we got to do from there.
Cool.
Were there any other questions for me, or otherwise I'm going to have to jump? But really good to see everybody again, and I'm sure it won't be too long until we're back together again. So thanks for checking out Zoomtopia. Thanks for the conversation, and you're in good hands with the rest of the Zoom crew. So
yeah, thanks, Andy, very much.
Colin, did you want to jump in, throw your question out?
Andy,
you can go.
Well, yeah, okay, I can catch Andy again, but it was just a quick one. What kind of quality could you expect to send to these platforms?
1080p or 720p, just like today. So if the meeting is 1080 capable, you'll have the ability to stream 1080. If the meeting is not 1080 capable, you have the 720 option. And that's a choice that you make when you set up the stream. There's a button for that. So
wow, interesting. Very
yeah, today, by the way, I know it's a feature that we rolled out that nobody got. And I thought everybody was gonna get real excited about. And I was kind of sad that nobody mentioned it. But earlier this summer, we released 1080p live streaming from Zoom, and you have a little dialogue that you pick.
I'm streaming to YouTube right now at 1080 directly out of Zoom.
I was really proud of that one.
yeah.
All right, everybody, I gotta run. Good to see you. Take care.
Take care, Andy. Robert.
You've got Robert with a question.
Yes, Sam, can I just address this to you and your team? One of the things that the great Jonathan Weber has said is that you do rehearsals to figure out, so everyone knows what to do when things go wrong. Could you talk a little bit about your rehearsals and the takeaways you had from the rehearsals that you did before the event?
Yeah, so we definitely had a lot of new things on this show. We had at scale, we had so much more in the gallery views, the chat overlays, the chat bots, all these new things. None of them were new. Some of them were actually admittedly new, but none of them were new in that, like, going back to several events we did previously, Perspectives, Growth Summit, several internal events. We've already been using the chat bot and the chat overlay. We've been using the chat overlay since March on internal events. We've been using the chat bridge since August on internal events. So part of it is just making sure that that first day of the show can't be the first time these things are being used. You have to have tried them out and made sure that they work at scale, be that internal testing or be that the best way is actual honest to God events, where they're just smaller events. You're able to kind of like dip your toes in the water a little bit on this. So it would not be true to say that Zoomtopia was just the first one where all of it happened. That said, also, one of the things we did for this show is we actually, all the Zoom computers that were used, my team bought. We didn't get them provided by the production company. We actually bought 58 MacBooks, 30 Sonnets with DeckLink cards, $110,000 worth of equipment. That way we've got it for all the future shows and to be able to support customer events, as we now say exactly what we're saying this week, which is, look, we can do hybrid shows. This is how we do them. Do you want us to do exactly this? I will fly somebody with MacBooks and DeckLinks, and they just walk into your production company, say, hey, hand me some SDI lines. I'll hand you some SDI lines. Let's do a show. But as we bought that equipment and commissioned all of it, we spent about a week and a half commissioning it and getting all the computers set up with all different apps we would need now and in the future that we could think of, getting them all set with the right settings that we want, setting all the desktops to be black, all the good stuff. And then we spent about 2 weeks actually running drills on them. So we physically built every single theater space from a Zoom perspective. We actually built all these shows in the theaters were switched on ADEM2MEs. My team built the actual profile that we loaded onto those, including here's all the macros and the multi-views and how we're going to use SuperSource. So we actually built that, which was really interesting, working with a production company where they're like, you guys are the best client ever. Like, you just handed me, here's your whole show, just hit buttons. Like, Olivia here built their companion files for the 2XLs that were going to run it. But we built all of that, and then we sat there and we spent a couple days moving all the equipment and hooking up. This is the laptop for this room with the DeckLink for this room with the cable for this room, testing every bit of the chain. And then we spent another several days over the course of a week opening all the computers in the one space where we had them, getting them all connected to TeamViewer for all of my remote users, and having everyone run drills on how do we move from session to session with all these ZoomOSC instances. To do this chatbot overlay system, we had 2 instances of ZoomISO and 4 instances of ZoomOSC running on a single computer, with the actual servers and Isadora to handle the filtering. And so they basically would get all that set up and running inside of a test Zoom event. And then they would say, go, start the timer, and take them all out of one, move them to the next session down that Zoom event, practicing how they're joining and all of that. And we ran drills on that for like 3 8-hour days in a row that week before the show. So I hope that answers the question, but the answer is a lot. We practiced a lot.
Let me ask a kind of a human-sided question about rehearsals and Zoom being a piece of it. Run into it not every time, but enough to bug me. And that is, Zoom has done a great job developing a tool, and you hear it come from Zoom employees often. One of our top priorities is simplicity, right? And so the world is convinced that by experience and messaging and so forth that it's a simple tool. And it is. I mean, part of my Why ZoomISO article was all about that. We didn't have to teach them anything to get to the green room, which was a Zoom meeting, but then we were, prepping them to throw them over to, in this case, a vMix call platform, which, just scared the heck out of them. But needless to say, the challenge that I see show up every once in a while are individuals who say, no, I won't be attending rehearsals. I've been working with Zoom the last 2.5 years. Got it, and it's this, this assumption on their part, and naturally it's followed with feedback and expectations and things that go outside the things they're assuming, but them equating clicking on a link and having it, the browser assist them with the link, the browser assisting is to then tie in and open up the Zoom app. I mean, there's very little most people have to do to get into a meeting, and they think that in itself is the rehearsal, and it's not. It's timing, run of show, all that. But do you guys run into that, and what kind of counsel do you have on how you guys handle that type of feedback?
Yeah. Yes, we absolutely run into that. We also deal with presenters. But I think everybody's kind of in the same boat here, and it's a continuous battle. The thing that I've started recently doing, and it gets better the more complex your show is, because they start to understand. But the biggest message that I come to them with is the rehearsal is not for you. The rehearsal is not for you to learn your script or how you're going to present. I want you to come with all of that done. By the time you show up to my rehearsal, you should already know all of your script and your content. This is not when we start first looking at the teleprompter and seeing, oh, I don't like that word, let's change this. No, that's already happened. When you come in, it's so me and my crew can rehearse how we're going to do the show. You are my prop for this purpose. You are here. Like, this is Tech Week. Anyone from the theater world, like, this is not blocking rehearsals. This is Tech Week. We are now labeling the tech and layering that on, and that's what we're rehearsing. And that's really hard to get buy-in, especially the higher up the food chain you go. But we've built a lot of trust in our executives and our presenters through a series of complicated shows. And I guess some of the trick is you have to be careful every time you pull off magic, because then they expect it next time. So I definitely spend a lot of time saying, like, hey, this was magical and we managed to get it, but we got lucky and nothing went wrong. And if something had gone wrong, we wouldn't have been able to do it, because, this is how we planned out. You can do a lot with stand-ins. You can do a lot with other things. You can simplify how they join. You mentioned how easy it is to get on Zoom. And that's honestly, that was what catapulted Zoom when all of this started a couple years ago, was the simplicity of it. Like, I can be doing an interview for ESPN and I just say, hey, here's the Zoom link, and they join. And that stays true no matter how much production I have going on. It just has to be the right Zoom link, and it's not the webinar, it's the talent meeting and whatnot. But especially as more and more you see us on our shows focusing on, I'm trying to get away from a whole lot of, and then we have my 16:9 slideshow the whole time, and I've got my speaker pip next to them, and they have slide control and they just step through their show, and into more visually engaging. I want content that is designed for the setup. If I know that their camera framing is going to be this, and these are the words they're going to say, I want to take that content and turn it into bullet points that are a transparent overlaid graphic that illustrates their points with the right wording, or I want to have B-roll that I can cut away to, or I want to actually produce this show. That takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of buy-in, and you don't always get that buy-in. But when you do, you can create some really, really cool stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Great feedback. Any other questions, thoughts, shares?
Jeff, did you want to ask about that screen share issue with ISO and see if we can unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, well, Andy's departed,
Jonathan, do you have the
so
answer for
Jonathan might be able to help out with that.
Yeah, I might be able to help. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, it's just kind of a continuing challenge with using ZoomISO, and that's not a global statement. I mean, we love what it does, but the one capture that we're challenged by is capturing the screen share or active screen share, and reliably, I guess. I mean, if we're in the main room or a breakout room and we disable and then re-enable the engine, we can get it, but that's not practical if you're on air, right? I mean, if you're already streaming video out, you can't bounce the engine. So I don't know if it's a known issue, and I see discussions on other Discord channels as well. It's not massive, but is it a known issue? I don't have clarity whether it's a known issue or just an unknown workflow that we all need to adjust to. So wondering what you got.
Yeah, great question. And I can speak to this a little bit. So screen capture is it's our current priority when it comes to updates for ZoomISO. Andy would say the same thing. We've seen a lot of, I'd say most of our bug reports and issues with the latest version have been because of screen sharing issues and how that's captured. A lot of that stems from the fact that from the transition from ZoomISO version 1 to version 2, we completely changed the video architecture behind it. And one of the things that had the most significant change was how we pulled in screen share content. And this gives us a lot of advantages, like you notice the ability to access simultaneous screen shares. It's not a feature that we use often, but Zoom does have the ability for multiple participants to be sharing screen at the same time. And ZoomISO version 2 can pull those video feeds at the same time. With that said, there are some bugs that are introduced and some difficult behaviors we're trying to track down. And you're right, there are issues with the video engine when it comes to screen sharing. Sometimes you do have to restart the engine to get it working again. I would say just a small piece of advice on this. As we're starting to figure out the issues and patch them in the hot fixes and builds we're putting out, one thing to pay attention to is that if you noticed in regular Zoom, when you begin a screen share, when somebody else begins a screen share, there's a momentary transition period, right? The screen might go gray and say so-and-so has started sharing their screen. And during that moment, you need to be patient as to when you call the screen share from that. So if you are trying to grab a screen share from somebody in ZoomISO, wait until that moment has passed, wait until the screen share has fully activated, and then go ahead and call that screen share from the user interface, and you'll see a higher chance of success for that. But again, I won't speak too much to this without Andy here, but I can say it's a priority for us to nail down these issues. Please keep them coming. We've heard many of these issues and we're working on them. And hopefully on the next update, these will be resolved.
Yeah. And that, in the Zoom Test Kitchen is all about knowledge of behavior, be it good behavior, bad behavior, or unexpected behavior. At least we know about it. We know it's a warm to hot spot for you guys, developing and fixing and so forth. That's all I ever seek for is just kind of where are we? And because the unknown, the mystery, the pop-ups, flubbing up in front of the customer or the audience is really the very, very last option that we'd ever opt into. And being prepared for it is like, hey, if that's unstable for the moment, then do it a different way for the moment, right? Until it really becomes highly reliable. So outside of that, all the other pieces of ZoomISO are just off the charts. It's just become such an incredible tool and useful to so many. So I appreciate that update. It's real. It's not just us. We can correct things, but we'll kind of hang back and wait, because there's share. If you want to capture a share, that's related to an individual, right? Who is sharing, or you can have one ISO channel that's just sitting there waiting for the active share, the next active share, and that will remain the same ISO output the whole time, even as shares come and go. Correct? So it's super promising, and we've seen the results of it, but it's just it hasn't been consistent, unfortunately, is all. I will say I was reminded again, coming into this meeting, I had auto start on recording inside of the Zoom meeting, and I'm over here on my ISO Mac, and I'm like, why can't I enable the engine? And so I just softly reminded myself, yeah, I got to stop the recording for a moment. And that enables ISO to start capturing, and then I can re-enable the recording. And we did it for David too, who, when I say, hey, will you cut the show and so forth, he quick bounce off. But that was prior to, well, that was right inside of airtime, but kind of inconsequential at that. But yeah, if you can bounce it, great. But start ZoomISO prior to starting your records, and ZoomISO indicates, right, that you're recording the meeting, because it looks to Zoom just like a local record, and then you can still do your cloud record as well. That's just kind of a announcement for anybody who's here who hasn't spent a lot of time with it yet, but it's becoming a stronger and stronger tool every single day. And if you're not using it, you will be. I mean, the fact is it's a hardware consolidation effort at best of these laptop penning farms that we've been doing the last couple of years, right? And has really cleaned that up, and we get great resolution, we get clean feeds. I mean, it's a dream result for sure. Very good. Any other questions for Sam behind the scenes? You guys are amazing out there. I mean, I wish, anybody who wanted to could have just been there just to see what you guys were doing and how impressive it was. And it was just a fantastic example of a, in-person to remote, and it was amazing. So thank you for putting your necks out there, and to your own leadership team, but the world itself, and especially folks like us who are looking for how others are doing it, and you guys are really setting a really nice pace.
Robert has a question, and then there's a question or two in the chat we can bring in.
Cool. Thank you.
This is actually a bit of a personal question for Jonathan, but how on earth are you getting 1080p, 30 FPS, zero jitter, and I can see the hairs on your head, the individual hairs on your head?
Yeah, good question. I'm using a good camera. I've got a good video pipeline, and Zoom handles the rest. If you're interested in details on that, I'm using a Panasonic GH4, which is a mirrorless camera with a good lens, Sigma 18-35, piping that into a capture card, and here we are.
Brilliant.
Very
That's really
cool.
brilliant.
I'm trying to remember, Jonathan, you're using the web presenter right now for your capture card?
I'm not actually. I'm just using a simple USB HDMI capture card, but I do often use the Blackmagic Ultra Studio recorder that goes to Thunderbolt. That's a good one.
And I see Grant's question here in the chat. I will probably need to drop in a couple minutes here. I have time for a couple more questions before I need to get to another meeting. But Grant was asking in the chat for Zoomtopia, is there anything in the production that you would do differently? We are always trying to innovate and grow and continue down our path. But I think something that kind of struck me this year was I feel like I've always known the next 3 steps while we were at each show. I'm really happy with what turned out, but I have my next 3 steps ahead of me. And I don't feel like that as much this time. I feel like a little bit we're kind of catching up for what I want to do and how I want it to be. Like what that experience was on the main LED wall and the main stage there with the way we used chat and reactions and graphics. And I think I'm really happy with it. So now for me, it's about making that simpler, more reliable, easy to scale. So that's, I think, a lot of our next focus. Not that we're not going to stop coming up with every idea we can, but now it's about making that really repeatable. The big thing that I will be doing differently for Zoomtopia next year is the stuff we're doing is bleeding edge. And because of that, it is complex and it does need a lot of specific oversight and planning. And next year, I think we're going to have a deeper focus on owning some more of the tech direction side of things at an individual theater level, versus this year we did it very much as a supervisory level. And I had lots of people floating, but I didn't have very many spaces. Like there were 9 different stages that we equally equipped. I didn't have a dedicated person in each space. I had a good team of people that we're all multitasking and floating them. And it worked okay. It worked decently, but I think next year I will probably take a much more heavy-handed direct approach, which is in its own way a little bit of my sales pitch of what we're doing is hard, but I do have people who are really good at it. So if you need help, definitely reach out.
Very cool.
Josh was asking what would be a good workflow to show Zoom chat into program with moderation. And before I throw that to you, I just want to share that Andy built for me, and it's not just for me, it's available to anyone who'd like it. I'm happy to share it with you. An Isadora file, sorry, my share isn't working, an Isadora file that connects with ZoomOSC that grabs all the Zoom chat messages. Sorry, I should have said Andy and Jonathan. Apologize, because Jonathan, I know, did the Isadora stuff here, or at least much of it. So it grabs all the chat messages, it brings them into an Isadora workflow in Isadora. I can then decide which of those chats I want to accept, and then I can throw those up on screen if I want. I don't know if Jonathan, if you want to talk at all about that.
I can jump off on that a bit more. And David, I will say that the specific Isadora project that Andy gave you, that is something that he primarily put together. So definitely want to make sure he gets the credit for that one. It's very simple, elegant. It's using a database actor with some custom JavaScript to be able to manage all the incoming chat information, store it properly along with the names of who said the chat, and then give you a way to move it from bucket to bucket of this is all the chats. These are the chats that I like. Okay, now these are the chats that are going on screen as a graphic. And I will say that the all Isadora flow works well. You do start to have some limitations when it comes to how you display that chat in the final graphic. Isadora can do text rendering well, but not very efficiently. So you do start to get into issues with if you want a very complicated animation for the chat coming on screen, or if you want the layout of the box to be dynamically sized depending on the size of the chat message, that does start to become difficult. But just going back to the general question about how do you accomplish moderation flow like this, it all starts with ZoomOSC. Currently, that is the way that you get the chat messages coming out without having to dive deeper into the SDKs or into a custom Zoom app for this project. But you start with ZoomOSC. The chat output command is very straightforward. And with that output, you not only get the message of the chat, but you also get who said it, what their status is, whether they're panelist, attendee, other details about that participant. There's Zoom ID if you need to identify them that way. And then you can take that data, parse it however you want, whatever applications you want. In our case, we use either Isadora or we use a JavaScript server using Node.js. And then once you pull that apart, then you display it, render it as an HTML page, which is something we like to do, render it in Isadora. I think there are ways to convert that and to send it into vMix and use the vMix titler as a process for that. We have at times used the vMix data source to be able to pull from a spreadsheet online. So chat goes into a spreadsheet using some Isadora project or some way to write to that file. And then you pull that into vMix and have those displayed on a graphic. Of course, the key part of moderation, you do need to have some interface in that line to be able to say, these are good messages, these are bad messages. For the main stage in Zoomtopia, we took that a step further and we had the ability to take a message that we liked, add it to a list of our liked messages, and then even edit and moderate it. So if we wanted to, we did use this, correct grammar, adjust punctuation if needed before sending that on to the main stage. We also have the ability to modify the names. So if we wanted to have Jonathan Cocotello come in as Jonathan K, it takes away that last name and initializes it just to make things a bit more anonymous and a bit more easy to use afterwards and to not have to worry about the public data and personal information on that. So that's a long-winded answer to say that there's many ways to accomplish it. Hopefully that's enough information for you to figure things out, or to we can engage in a deeper conversation on that.
Good stuff. Thanks for that explanation, for sure. It's been a long time coming, right? I mean, the whole chat, bridge and so forth. I mean, it just pieces, and the growth and maturity over time has been pretty constant, for sure. It's especially once we started, manually creating green rooms and the stage and so forth, having to pull that together amongst different meetings, it really pushed the need for sure. And you guys have absolutely been champions on producing some solutions for us for sure. So any other particular questions? We got Jonathan and Olivia and Kevin, or is it just you three from Zoom left? I want to be respectful of your time, and if there aren't any ringing questions here, let me check the YouTube channel real quick. That's been pretty quiet on the chat, so just reach out and say thank you guys so much for really everything. Jonathan, I saw you on site. I know just because you have a Zoom badge doesn't mean you got to go to Zoomtopia. I know that was a reality, but did get to see a few of you and meet you and so forth. And just thanks for everything. Yeah, I mean, especially the exposure of all your guys' hard work. I mean, that's just not necessarily an expectation, and you guys being so transparent about the efforts and the development, and whether it's built in or third party, I mean, it's just incredible. For some of us, it lets us know that, hey, it can be done. For others, it's like, hey, that's something I can do, or we need to, hire that out, whatever the case may be. And then, this always, the piece is how deep can the roadmap get? That's your intellectual property that we realize and respect, that you can, sometimes we get little nuggets or teases and so forth, but until it's, fully vetted and released. But, things that are released. I was talking to somebody the other day, and I said, the history and the record of the rapid pace of development and releases from Zoom up against the percentage of success, which is just really high. I mean, there have been very few moments in my experiences where there's been a new release and it came with a problem. I mean, I'm not saying it hasn't. I've had one for sure moment like that because of my AMD processor, but outside, and that was fixed within like 2 days or something. It was really fast. But needless to say, the success rate of the rapid pace of development, and then you go to a Zoomtopia and just get more insertion of more verticals and more products that you didn't even hear or ever heard about or even imagined. It's just like, wow, how in the world is this organization pulling this off? And it's super impressive. So I certainly really glad that I've, dove into Zoom as an organization, when I did, and just haven't let go, don't plan on letting go. It's such a vital part. I mean, I just keep itching in our space, in the production space. I just keep itching on calling ZoomISO and Zoom a call manager. I mean, at a certain level, it's a ideal call management solution. And one of the big primary drives is the willingness from the customer to use it, right? I mean, give them, there's other product names that I won't, put out there for the archives, but needless to say, there are full-fledged, full-feature call managers. I'm not saying it's all that, but it's plenty of it. And the biggest benefit is it's a platform that the customers are absolutely willing to use and vote yes and so forth. And 2+ years ago, we were the ones kind of upset. The producers were the ones upset because the customers were telling us they only wanted to do it on Zoom. And we were saying, no, I use vMix Call or I use OBS Ninja. I mean, we were the ones kind of tweaking about it for a while. Now it's become an incredible benefit. And so it's just really been a nice transition. That's for sure. So, well, to all you Zoom, I'm certainly not kicking you out of the kitchen, that's for sure. But if you need to go, feel free to. So grateful for all that you've done, all that you share. And if there's any, Robert, you have your hand up there. Is that a hand?
No,
That's just that's not a hand up as in you have a question. That's just a reaction, right? All right, very good. Yeah. So thanks everybody. And Olivia, I hadn't met you before. Thanks for coming. Good to meet you. And Kevin, always good to see you. And Jonathan, of course, as well. So have a enjoyable weekend. Hopefully you guys are caught up. Are you guys tied into the, well, you guys had another Zoomtopia overseas this week, right? Were you guys deeply involved with all that?
Our team was, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Event services put on both EMEA and APAC and the US. So event services in total did all three of them. Yep.
Was this week's easier than last week just because it was number 2?
It's a different challenge, different every time. So
absolutely.
It certainly was. Just for context on that, right? So the EMEA and the APAC Zoomtopias were all virtual instead of hybrid. So different challenges, but we have different members of our team present in those locations who are able to use combinations of pre-recorded videos and recordings from the Zoomtopia North America segments to be able to construct those and rebroadcast those on the Zoom Events platform. So nothing but successes we've been getting so far this week, and it's great to have such a global rollout of the Zoomtopia experience.
Yeah, that's cool. Congratulations. Well, very good. I'll wish you all well. Have a fantastic weekend. You guys deserve a big fat break, that's for sure. But you've done just a fantastic job. Glad I was a part of it.
Yes, definitely. We hope to see you at the behind the scenes webinars that Sam talked about at the beginning, that Olivia has posted in chat.
Yeah, I'm going to take those links he put in the chat. We didn't talk about it at all, but in meeting chat, I don't know, is it out or coming? The alignment of in meeting chat and team chat being having that flexibility and formatting, and join a meeting late and you'll get all the history. Kill the meeting, it's over, but it can still live in team chat and so forth, so that the conversation and the work can go on. Is that a release, or was that a roadmap announcement?
Yeah, I don't believe that's released yet.
Okay.
It might be working its way into the beta release if you have access to that, but it is not publicly released, and I don't have any more details on that. But
I'm not asking for them. I was ready to scroll up because I was here early, right? But I mean, that was something we didn't talk about as far as announcements, but it was announced that the tie between the functionality, the rich functionality of team chat is going to find its way into in meeting chat, which has just tons of benefits. I mean, everybody knows. I mean, you go to a breakout room late or come back to the main set, there's clipping points where you go, I wish I would have had that. And so people have to get creative, and the host sends out the chat, or whatever the case may be. But lots and lots of things to look forward to. So needless to say, we're about to transition to just the standard Zoom test kitchen. So we'll let you guys go and wish you a great weekend. Thanks so much, Jonathan and team.
Yes, thanks everyone. Have a good weekend.
John Edelson, how are you? I haven't been able to say hi, but I saw you come in.
Doing great.
A while back.
Need to comb my hair a little bit better, but that's the story of my life.
Hey, I'm the worst. I usually shave my head, and I've decided to let it grow back. And there's this horrible moment of where it's going to look really bad, and then it'll finally start laying down. But needless to say, don't worry, John. But
I
John and I got to meet at
really
Zoomtopia. That was a big benefit of being able to shake John's hand, and Guy has not been able to be on camera, but he might be listening. Got to meet Guy as well. So getting in person after these, literally saying hi for the first time was a virtual experience, and finally graduated and got to shake hands and spend a little time together. So that was fun. Anyways,
it's great fun to realize people are taller than this.
I know, right? I know. Sometimes wider, when you meet me, it's like, oh, that guy's big. Anyways, let's dig into, anything at this point. There's discussion out there on, with some folks on, whiteboards. There's whatever you want to dig into. Does anybody have any particular challenges or successes and so forth? And open the floor and test some things out or talk about them. Andy, what you got?
Well, first of all, can you hear me?
A little soft, but yes.
I can bring it up. Hold on. That should be better.
There we go.
Yeah, I got a few questions. I put one in the chat, but I thought I'd ask it here. For vanilla Zoom, or I guess even a webinar, is there a way to auto enable captions and transcript? And
so when you start the meeting, it will automatically be captioning on.
Yeah.
Not that I'm aware of.
And David's shaking his head because this actually came up with our temple, is that they never turn them on.
Oh.
and they need to. It needs to. And I don't know if it's because there's no one really managing that particular webinar or Zoom call, or if it's just that they forget. But if the person who set the meeting up is not managing it, it would be a good feature.
Yeah. And David and I were talking, was that just last night, David, in a short discussion. And, one of my wish list items as a Zoom admin, at different levels, but they're all the same. You fire up a meeting or a webinar and you've got about 3 to 4 to 5 different places to have to check this, check that, confirm that, and it's just like, I'd like a tech admin's checklist. I mean, I'm a pilot at heart, and we're driven and drilled for going through our checklists from pre-flight to taxi to takeoff, and I mean it's just top to bottom, and it would be nice to have a checklist that is either available or, the security badge gets close, right? Because there is a cluster of items. I don't love that when you turn this one on or off, that the whole menu goes away and you have to bring the menu back up every time. But if you could, have a bit of a rich checklist so that you can see it top to bottom from the security. I can't even see the security badge right now because David's host, but the sharing, whiteboards, sharing in general, mute, can you mute or not? Can you unmute video? All those different options. But then, the doorbell is someplace else. The chat feature of who can they chat with, and just kind of consolidate that for the host. And a recording. Oh my gosh, I've kicked myself in the butt with the customer, once recently, of forgetting to start the record, because you get in there. I mean, you're a good steward.
That one you can auto enable, right? I think that one.
Well, you can auto enable it, but when you show up 30, 45 minutes early, you really, I feel compelled at times, and I just have to get rid of that compulsion, is to, either pause or stop the recording, because it's just this long pre-record of nothing except it's going to have to get trimmed. But, I'm getting to the point where it's like, hey, let them trim it, and, just don't there's just too much risk attached to it. So, just things like that. But then David and I added to that, on the recording, if we've got a 2:00 top of the hour start, let me tell the record to start at 1:55. Just let me plug in a time, for it to trigger on, and, because it'll go off when you end the meeting. Right. So, just little things like that, especially when you're, liable, for the success of all the components of a meeting.
It's not in my wheelhouse, but I know that, on enterprise levels for, companies, corporations, where it's not, it'll be someone in that department who's just setting up the meeting. And if they, like you said, if they had that, that checklist that to fly this thing, that would just be great.
Just be great. What were you showing there, David? Was that Was that a mock list?
I just did a screen capture. I've now since
Oh.
deleted it, but I just a screen capture of the security.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit of a tease, you know. It's like I do wish they were check boxes, not check marks, and so the window would stay visible. But outside of that, it is the beginnings of what I'm asking for, right?
And
so,
Frank just said in the chat about meeting templates. I wonder if this is something we could have in meeting templates, right? Where when you set up
so
a
they
meeting
announced templates.
Right.
Yeah.
So I wonder if there will be a way to say, for this template, I want closed captioning on, and for this template, I don't, or something like that. That would be good.
Yeah.
Was that just for webinars or?
No, I think it's both.
Okay.
So I mean, and that was probably in my world anyways, where I do a lot of freelance work with from green rooming to TDN and so forth, and then I come here Fridays and do the Zoom test kitchen. Well, if I was using my account for a job yesterday and I had to go into the portal and change settings for that job, I've got to go manually, put everything back in place, even just for the Zoom test kitchen the next day, where templates will take care of that. So there will be a binding to the definition of options to the Zoom test kitchen. So I don't care necessarily now. I don't know how rich they're going to make these templates, but if they make them rich enough, it won't matter what I changed yesterday, because I won't need to change it anymore. But no matter what it was yesterday, when I fire up this meeting, it'll inherit those saved templated options. So that to me is thrilling. I've been asking, not really formally asking for it, but wishing it for 2 years, and it's a biggie. It's a real biggie, because even within a single organization, you could meetings with a whole different purpose. You want to turn this off and turn this off and turn that on and so forth, and and you have to be familiar enough. It's like, well, can you do that in meeting once you start, or is it something that you have to do in the portal before you even light the meeting up, right? And because most things off the portal don't carry forward into a meeting that's already running. So yeah, that one was an exciting one for sure. What else? I didn't come with an agenda. I knew Zoom was coming, so I wanted to give them as much time as possible.
Trevor's got a question here in the chat. He says, does anyone use Isadora camera tracking over with ZoomISO or Zoom? I've been using for music therapy and audience student interactivity with different triggers for music and visual things. Seen people experimenting with that.
Yeah, that's beyond my exercise with it for sure. Anybody else?
Isadora camera tracking. I'm not sure. Is that sort of like center stage that it's able to follow you? Program something in Isadora that allows
Isadora can do a bunch of things there, like you can track like a code or something. I have one project where I'm only on the cloud side for an arts project where they run machine learning algorithms in the cloud on Isadora that then detects what thing someone is showing in Zoom, and then that triggers like audio and video feedback back to the people. So they put 50 people in breakout rooms. We have 50 instances spun up. It joins it, and then it detects what they're looking at, and that way they can react to it. It's really cool. And you probably could do something similar like that with tracking.
Pretty cool.
I have a tendency to use it for drawing and things like that. So having people move their hands, like using the camera for like a sensor, and feed it out into Ableton and control MIDI and things like that.
Well, while you're on camera and unmuted, Trevor, I don't know Trevor, so can you share share with me anyways. I'm not saying you haven't been here, because I haven't been here more than anybody else, I think, but I'd love to get to know you a little bit. Where are you coming to us from, and what do you do, and so forth?
Yeah, I'm in Princeton, New Jersey right now. I'm a composer, musician. Yeah, I've been kind of following actually a lot of things here, and then also in office hours, kind of as I've been working. I used ZoomISO actually in a performance that I did about a year ago in October. So I do a lot of network performance. It's kind of become more of a specialty. So a lot of string playing, pretty much anybody, and trying to do very low latency options, as well as playing with latencies. So this particular performance kind of took advantage of both of those things, like using jack trip along with clean feed, and then timing things out in Ableton. And it was the kind of the goal was to cover different time zones. So we hit nine time zones synchronously, 3 quartets, orchestra, and 6 soloists. It was like
awesome.
So this
wow.
is where my head's at as I'm asking these questions. So I'm trying to build a more audience interaction, and the latest updates with ZoomISO are pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's like, it's not a whole new product, but it's definitely a huge jump in maturity, stability, reliability from version 1 for sure, right? But version 1 caught and captured the attention of lots, and version 2 has, now that they're inside Zoom, and Andy and team have access to things that used to be a barrier, right? Being a third-party developer, now they're internal. It's just amazing how, and quickly. I mean, it's not quite been a full year since they, have acquired those tools, and the leaps and bounds that it's taken forward been super impressive. So good stuff. Well, glad to have you here. Glad to get to know you a little bit. I'm in the middle of the U.S. I'm in the Kansas City area myself, and travel around and support. Sometimes it's all virtual, in my studio that I'm here, that I built early 2020, like a lot of folks, but obviously getting out and traveling more, and doing sometimes lately it's been in person only, and then that's a total mix where I may be there for the virtual arm, but I kind of mix the TD in there on site with knowing that there's a live stream going out there as well. But there's not a lot of dual production in my experience right now, where people, they kind of produce and write it, a bit of the show for the remote audience, and then also for the in-person audience, which it's not completely separated, we know, but they're, if you don't want to make your remote audience feel alienated, there should be some special attention taken to them. I think we talked about it at Zoomtopia. The one thing that Sam showed us that they had was, I think they called it their Mona board, because they had these circles, and they all had the picture of Mona Lisa in them, and that was just the placeholders, because they weren't able to finish that part of their plans, and that was a representation of the remote audience, that they're out there, and it's their faces, it's their real camera feeds, the whole bit, but they did run out of time on that, and but that was the one piece is, we hear a lot from, Alex and others that, that natural human behavior is, when I'm on stage, I'm going to naturally speak to those in front of me physically, and unless reminded to do otherwise, right? And so that could be verbal coaching, from a director, for instance, but it should be a screen that you're able to see as well, of the gallery view or something that reminds you constantly, to help break that natural human behavior, that there's a remote audience out there, so that you can be reminded and look, at the camera to them at times so that they don't feel, alienated from the experience as well. So yeah, but man, they got so many of the key elements for sure. And it's just been really good training, if nothing else, that exposure. Andy.
Yeah, I just wanted to rewind a little bit. I'm really curious about what Trevor was talking about, what you were talking about there with Jack Trip and working with a lot of remote musicians and groups. And if you've got anything you can share, a link or anything, if you could put that in the chat. Also, I don't know if you're familiar with Office Hours, but there's a band on Office Hours, and some of the guys there might be interested in what you're doing. Cool, thank you.
Yeah, just dropped a link to the this is orchestral performance. So it's in New York. There are 2 quartets. So orchestra in New York, 2 quartets in London, another that was in Brooklyn, and then that was the 6 soloists in the different time zones, and myself. It was very challenging performance. It was like a little while ago even, but we have somebody using ZoomISO to do all of the camera movements and things.
What was the latency you talked about built into the composition where it was okay that it was asynchronous, or was it that you were syncing people up by letting the latency come back around and then they start playing, and then it was able to, like they can't play in real time, but if it's a timed phrase, because I know there's been some products out there that have done that where you play something and then someone hears it and they add to it once it comes back around.
Right. Yeah, that's like using Zoomtopia, I think, is one software that does that. So you have like your clock in the different areas.
Yeah.
What I kind of a guiding principle with with my composition, it was using the latency that was basically in each of the locations, and then also actually having the conductor. It was really interesting is actually having the conductor over Zoom. It made it so that the downbeat or ictus would be the same for everybody. So no matter where everybody was, it would actually come back to where we were at the exact same time, kind of resolving that portion of things. But the latency for each of the locations was somewhat predictable. So it was built into my composition, but there was another composition where it was from 10 years ago where it wasn't built in. So we actually had to extend it because it wasn't great enough in that way. So the thing that was funny is that we were finding that there were things lining up that I wasn't really even intending to. And especially with musicians, they're able to feel the space, and whenever I gave them feedback of some kind, like either a delay or something like that, they're actually able to then time out what they were doing and feel as though they were pretty much in time in that sense. So there's like an interesting result that came from that, I felt like.
Wow.
Very cool.
Very good. Topics, focuses. Otherwise, I'll call it a wrap.
If people want, I can show the Zoom chat proxy and the Zoom chat proxy into HDR graphics for Zoom chat real quick. I just set it up.
We can do that. Let me, actually, I don't have, David stepped away. Let me reclaim host so I can give you co-host and let you share as well.
I don't need co-host.
Oh, you don't? Okay.
So there's this little tool that I built called Zoom Chat Proxy that is open source on the Office Hours GitHub. And what it does is HDR Graphics has this really cool social view where you can have like a list, a chat, a list, and a real-time chat. In the latest version, they also added that you can just have a list. So this would be for talent, like a teleprompter view. You can have like a moderator view. The good thing with this is you can't trigger the things to go live. All you can do is you can add to the list, which then gets to the talent, so you can moderate. And so now if someone writes a chat in the chat method, you'll see it come up here, because what it does is John created a little hook into HDR graphics that you can send stuff into. So if I send Josh just send a message, so now I can add these to the list, and if I click here, I can even show it. And it's a super straightforward process, because all you need is ZoomOSC. You need to there's a bit of a learning curve in installing Node.js and running a little script, but yeah, this works really nicely, and we've been using it for a while. And since I know there's a bunch of people in here that like to use vMix, one of the cool things that we did with this one is we also serve all the data as I'll hide this one. We also serve all the data, so you can import it into a data source. So if I go into the data source manager, here I can add a new JSON, and this also works if we would be in a webinar that works with questions. So if someone asks a question, it ends up in there. So if I go to http://localhost, and you configure which port this should run on, there's a little setting file that you can use. I'll just need to figure out what I set my setting file to. See, it's 8080. There's actually something else in there, so I'll set to 8081. And there's a couple of sources that you have. There's one called AS, which is only a text source. So if I add text source, which is really useful if you need lower thirds. What that is, it is the active speaker according to Zoom. What you now can do is you go into, let's see, graphics, title. We can use this little headline here. And now in here, we want to always have the active speaker. So we'll just pull in the data source. We'll pull in the text one. And now if someone else speaks, you'll see that the lower third is already updating. So if you have like a lower thirds output.
So it should change to my name. Is that what you're saying? There we go. Yep.
So you can automate for smaller productions that. And then there is also, go back to the data source manager. This JSON, what I wanted to show is we can also do chat. And now this should be in, I put it wrong, it needs to be in the JSON /chat.
Greg Gibson, who hasn't said a word during this entire meeting, is telling you that your audio is low. I think his is even lower. That was just for his own edification, Greg.
So now we could say we want to set this data source up, and we will use the JSON one. And here we want to use the username. And for this one, we want to use yeah, Greg, I somehow always have low volume in vMix. It's
yeah, that flashing message. That was what his trigger.
So now we have like
sense.
this lower third, and if you go into the data source manager, now you can just go into the different things. Obviously, this lower third is not built for chat, but this allows you to pull it in, and all graphics tool that can work with native JSON or text can just log onto this and then get all the data.
Yeah. No, that's great. Hey, yeah, that could be really busy. I mean, it's auto populating the data source. You could have somebody managing that and just, really out of order if they needed to, clicking, and then the TD just switches it in or out. So
yeah, that's a cool thing why I build it so heavily into HR graphics, because you can have this workflow where the talent only gets to see the list. So if I go back to this is the talent view. They only see what the client approved. So this is the client view where they can approve stuff. They can't push stuff live. And you could even say, you know what, the talent also doesn't get to push live, but you could give them a little iPad or something. And if I set this to false, now me as the talent, I can bring the question I want to talk on live,
just on a touch screen type device. Yeah.
And this is the great thing, that you have the level of moderation with HR graphics in here. And if you can put this all into the cloud, of course, or like on a server and give access over VPN or the cloud formation, then Cloudflare, then all your client needs to do is open up a web page and they can get started. And they can get started. That's
very cool.
That's the whole thing.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Very cool. Talented man, Jonas. All right. Well, I think for this week, we're going to wrap things up. Our opportunity to, hear from the Zoom team is always an absolute treat for sure. And in my case in particular, to be able to, be there and, see what they were doing and how they were doing it and so forth to a degree. They were too busy to spend tons of time on all the details there, but their follow-up, I'll be sending out an email with the webinar links and so forth that Sam had provided. So it'd be just a reminder. So if you get a chance, I think the first one he said, was going to be kind of a high level Zoom events conversation. So don't let that sway you, because the next two, he promises that he, digs into deeper details and so forth. So we got a nice preview of it, I think, today for sure. And, share with your counterparts that the Zoom Test Kitchen meets here each Friday afternoon at 3:00 Eastern, and we're here. We've got our Discord channel now as well. So if you have interest in joining the Discord channel, we have a YouTube channel. They're all the name Zoom Test Kitchen, and we've got these. Streaming there. I've got just over a year's archive, I think, on the YouTube channel. We've been doing it for about 2.5 years, but plenty to kind of look back on. Some of it gets pretty aged when we're focused on Zoom, who releases and develops at the pace that they do. But needless to say, it's always fun to get together and and share. And next week we'll get back to. I know we have some release notes that we can catch up on with the Zoom client, and I'll advertise middle of next week some particular topics that's one of the other things. There's a channel inside the Discord server for Zoom Test Kitchen suggested topics even, so you can take some particular focuses. Robert, I was thinking about earlier before we go, translated ISOs are now a reality, right? They'll record ISOs of the live translation, I heard.
Yeah, it's just come up very recently, and there's a big I don't say it's an outrage, but the interpreters are really upset because whenever you record an interpreter, he has a copyright to his interpretation, just like when someone translates a book, the translator has the copyright and has to hand it over or sell it to the publisher. And suddenly the interpreters are all upset because they've lost the power of figuring out who is recording their interpretation or not. So there was a big discussion this week on LinkedIn and on Facebook about this. And the solution is really simple. The interpreters need to change their contracts with all.
That's what I was going to say. It sounds like a contract and pricing adjustment, if nothing else,
exactly.
right?
There's this as simple as that, and not get upset with Zoom, because it's not just Zoom who has that option, and it's not Zoom who's managing the switching on and off of the configuration of that option during a specific meeting, webinar, or event. So they're barking up the wrong tree. So I had a long discussion. I think towards the end of the week, they've started to understand that. So that's good. Yeah.
I thought about you when I saw that feature was there. A long time coming for you, for sure. And the translated captions, have you guys been leveraging those with success?
Not, we're testing. We haven't actually put them out into production yet. So there's a lot when you're doing commercial events with simultaneous interpretation or translation. You need to have the ownership of the responsibility of what goes out. So we need to test and make sure that what's going out is what we feel should be going out. And I haven't seen a way of being able to moderate what's going out. You either have a live person doing the captions, or you switch on the automatic live translations for captions. So there's no in between. And what we've been playing with at the moment is to have an interpreter interpreting, playing it back, comparing it with what the captions are being translated into, comparing them, and then just coming up with a figure. The good thing is that they've been using Otter, and Otter also allows you to put in certain keywords that are industry specific, so that even though the AI doesn't know those words, they realize that the words they're meant to use, or the phrases they're meant to use, are coming from a specific place. And that's really important for vertical market translation and interpretation.
Interesting. Little by little, complex projects for sure. I just earlier this week, as a wrap up of last weekend, we had a broadcast, and for the first time, our church leaders wanted me to, normally we used to have our own platform to broadcast to. They've since gone to Zoom, which is, all internal and private. But now they finally say, yeah, go ahead and put it out on upload it to YouTube. It was a recording that we didn't live stream it yet, but we will. But well, since this is kind of a post process, I found a VTT editor and kind of cleaned up the captioning and trimmed. I had trimmed the video already on the front end for sure, and had to figure out how to trim the VTT file as well. And some of the better tools make that pretty doggone simple. And then sizing up the lines in the file were too long. A lot of them were too long, but they have a lot of automated kind of functions to opt into what to auto fix and so forth. So it was a pretty cool experience. I just never had to do that VTT file edit before, but went pretty smooth. And YouTube made it a total piece of cake. Uploaded the video and then attached the VTT file, and bingo, just like, there you go, magic. It was great. So, well, very good. Anything else from anybody? We're gonna call it a wrap. Go out with a little bit of classic music. Anyways, we'll wrap it up for the archives. Good seeing everybody. Thanks for coming in and visiting, and we'll see you next week. All right, take care.
Good to see you back, Jeff. Thanks. Bye.